Welcome everyone to our live stream from behind the system. In today's talk, Joren is going to talk about Style Dictionary Configurator and Transforms. Your host of today, as mentioned, Joren Broekema, Mike Kamminga, and myself, Robert. But before we start, some housekeeping. This session will be recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel and on our website. You can use the chat to everyone to say hi. You can also use the Q&A button if you have questions, and you can upvote questions that are already present in there. At the end of the talk, as mentioned before, we are going to do a deep dive on the QA questions, and based on the upvotes, we will go through them. Please be kind and respectful. This is a safe place, and everyone needs to feel welcome. More about this can be found on our website, tokens.studio/code of conduct. Keep an eye out on our channels for future live streams, and if you have any ideas or suggestions, please feel free to reach out and contact us at support@tokens.studio. Before I give the word to Joren, first Mike has something to say. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Nice to see so many people here already. Yeah, I think today is a bit of a niche topic, but I think an interesting one. So yeah, Joren has been working over the last couple of months on building a playground for Style Dictionary, which turned out into quite a powerful tool by now. And it's basically, an in the browser, fully in-memory version of Style Dictionary that is tailored to, basically convert all the Token Studio tokens and all the additional tokens that we have outside of the DTCG spec, and basically helps that transform to any target platform. And that's what Joren is going to show today. And in parallel, we also recently released the Style Dictionary Transforms, which is again, a package that can be used, to integrate this in your own Style Dictionary pipeline. So I think, Joren is gonna tell you guys all about it. So I give it over to Joren. Have a nice one.
Right. So yeah, hi, I'm Joren. I will be sharing my screen in a second as I start off, but first I'll just introduce myself. I'm a front-end developer, a bit of a full-stack developer by now, and I'm freelancing for HEMA to work on the topic that Mike just discussed. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about design tokens and especially the handover to developers, and then to get it output it to multiple platforms. So let me share my screen. There we go. Not this. All right. So in front of you, you see already the Style Dictionary Configurator. I will go through the whole thing and explain the entire tool. But maybe just start off quickly on what a design token is. There's some people that are still a bit new to the concept. So basically, a design token is a design decision made by usually a designer. For example, the color of a button. And it's put inside of a token. And this token is often a JSON format. And it looks something like this. So it's, for example, we here have a color black, and it has a value and a type color. And these can be anything from your color palette, your spacer table, all these kind of core tokens, to also semantic tokens. So let's say the font size of your headings on your site throughout all your applications. Can also be component-specific tokens, like the background color of a button. And these are all design decisions tokenized. And why do we do this in the first place? It's because of a pretty old problem, is that when you have designers and you have developers, they often live in different worlds, and there's often not one source of truth of what the design decisions are. So that means that very often the code and the design, they will diverge. Which means that your button component, as you've designed it, may look like the button on the apps on the website at the start, but they might start diverging at some point, especially for bigger projects and larger component sets. And the core problem here is that the decisions of what the design is, there's no single source of truth, and that's kind of what design tokens is trying to solve or aiming to solve. I think with design tokens, very often the idea is that designers are the ones that control this, that set these design decisions. And at some point, they have to be handed over to developers so that these design decisions can actually be used inside of a component, inside of an application or a website. So these JSON tokens, they have to be transformed at some point, and they have to be exported to, for different platforms. So it could be that you have a web application and you want some CSS, but it could also be that you have an Android, native Android application, and you want some Android Compose tokens, or iOS Swift, or Flutter, or well, there's many different platforms. So Style Dictionary is a generic tool that takes your tokens as JSON and then aims to transform them or be able to transform them to multiple platforms. So this is what I will demo as well a little bit. Let me just put this away. So here you can see that we have a Style Dictionary Configurator. So Style Dictionary Configurator is kind of a playground, a web playground, where you can play with Style Dictionary as a tool. You can adjust your tokens, even upload your own tokens. And you can see what happens if you have a certain Style Dictionary configuration and how they will be exported as, for example, CSS variables. So I will show an example here. So the top of this editor here is your Style Dictionary configuration file. This is always JSON in this playground. And there's a couple of properties, and this is specific to Style Dictionary. So everything about this configuration file you can find in the Style Dictionary documentation. But if you're not very familiar with JSON format or with this configuration, you can also use this UI on the left over here. So we can see here that we have a CSS platform with a bunch of transforms and a bunch of formats in them. And you can click on the edit button to configure this. You can find your own transforms in this list. These are the base transforms that are registered by Style Dictionary by default. And there's also our own Style Dictionary transform group, which I will go more into later. And then here you can pick your format. So let's say I want to format to CSS variables. This is basically your platform output. So it could also be Android resources, for example. You can pick your thing here, and then you'll have to specify a file name. And here, maybe let's change this maybe and save it. So now that it's saved, we can actually see that our configuration file is updated. So now we can click on play. And we actually see that we have now in this output files, we can see we have a vars.css, which has our tokens as CSS variables. This is just one example. And we only have 2 colors and then a red range. Now I should probably go into a little bit more what Style Dictionary is and how it works under the hood, because I think this is where a lot of questions come up. It's like, how do I configure this, but how does it work under the hood? So where you can always go to the Style Dictionary documentation and click on Get Started and really read into what this tool is. But basically, in a nutshell, what happens in Style Dictionary under the hood is there's basically this diagram over here. So you have your JSON file with your design tokens, and these come from Token Studio if you're using Token Studio. And what's basically happening is we have Style Dictionary over here, which is this part basically. And there's a couple of there's 3 really important life cycles that happen that is important to understand. I think in order to understand Style Dictionary. So the first thing that happens is this JSON is being parsed. And what parsing basically means we're reading the data and we're getting an understanding of it, or we're transforming it so that we can understand it. So what happens is this is a text file, it's getting parsed, and then it becomes a Style Dictionary object. It's called a dictionary. And basically, now that it's a dictionary in JavaScript language, we can actually start transforming that dictionary. So we can do some transformations on it. For example, if we have some dimensions, we might want to add pixels as a unit at the end of it if it doesn't have a unit yet. This is an example of a transform. Maybe if we have our colors in hex, we might want to have them in RGB for CSS. So you might want to change the format of the token in that way. And Token Studio, for example, also has the power to do math inside of tokens. So you might be able to do multiplications for your dimensions. And to resolve those mathematical statements, we also do that in a transform. So what a transform does, it takes the dictionary object and it transforms it to a dictionary object. So it just runs over itself. And it's important to note that there's actually two different types of transforms. There's regular transforms. They happen before the references get resolved. So tokens can have references to other tokens, and those references have to be resolved. Otherwise, yeah, we don't know what the value will be. So there's transforms that happen before the resolving phase, and there's transforms that happen after the resolving phase. And usually you use regular transforms, but sometimes your transforms, they have to run on the resolved output. So for example, with resolving mathematical statements, in your math statements might also be references. So in order to do the math, we have to first resolve the references. So that's actually an example of a transitive transform. So after all that's done, after all the transforms are done, this is the second step. The last step happens, which is the format step. And this format step, for example, takes the dictionary object and then creates a CSS file. So it loops over all the properties of the dictionary. And then for each property, it puts it inside of a CSS file, for example, as a CSS variable. But this could also be JavaScript or iOS or Android or anything that you want, PHP, like you can do it whatever you want there. And this kind of goes for all three steps in Style Dictionary. You can write your own custom parser, you can write your own custom transforms, and you can write your own custom formats. So in this sense, it's a very flexible tool. You can make it pretty much do anything you want. I will show a little bit, maybe I should show an example that's a little bit more complex with some more cool tokens in there. What I can do is I can upload some tokens here. So you can click on the upload button and I can say here, actually, if I just refresh it, I will get a nicer example. So if I just go to the configurator.tokens.studio link, I will get an example. So I'll get some example tokens. And here you can see we have all kinds of tokens. So maybe go through here, we can see we have some math going on. So we have some reference here and a reference here, and they're getting multiplied by one another. So this is something that's not a default functionality of design tokens. It's not the default functionality of Style Dictionary, but because we made transforms, we can actually interpret these things and transform them to something that Style Dictionary does understand. Another cool example is we have some colors here. So we have a red color 500 here, and it has this color. And we take this as a base color in the palette. And then we say for our other variations, we use color modifiers. So we say that for the red 400, it is the red 500, but we just apply a lighten modification on it by 0.1. So it's the same color as the 500, but it's just lightened by 0.1. And then for the color 300, it's using the color 500, but lightened by 0.2. So this is one thing you could, for example, do in the Token Studio Figma plugin. And it will be here in the tokens.json. And this is also something that our transforms will handle for you so that that you get the proper output. So if we go to the red output here, you can see here we get the right output. And actually we can change this a little bit. So for example, let's say we want hex colors for all of them. That would be pretty easy to change. You could say here that this space will be not HSL, but we can make it RGB. That's RGB. And then for the formats, we can make it hex. And now you can see now that we have everything in hex colors. So that was a pretty easy adjustment I could make to get the right output that I want in my CSS. So if you know how Style Dictionary works and you know how the transforms work, it's quite easy to make it do what you want. You can have quite a lot of control over it. Another cool example is we have a shadow over here. So shadows in the design tokens, they're actually the values are objects. So let me show that. So we have a box shadow here, and we can see that the value is actually an object with multiple properties in them. So we have an X, a Y, a blur, spread, a color, and a type. And so generally, we want to transform this into something that is useful to, for example, CSS. So CSS won't just understand a value like this. You have to make, for example, transform it to a shorthand. So that's actually what we see when we go down you can see that it's being translated into the shorthand inset X, Y, blur, spread, and then the color. So that it's something that's useful inside of web context, inside of CSS context. But another thing that you might want to do is you might want to say, I don't want to, I don't want this object to be transformed into some kind of shorthand. Maybe I want every property of this value. Maybe I want that to be its own variable. So what we could do here actually, and this is another feature that we have, we can click on settings and we can say, I want to expand my shadow tokens so that the value of shadows will be expanded into its own properties. So we save this and you see everything runs again. And if we now go to our variables, we can now go down and we can see, oh, actually, we have our shadow tokens, but they're expanded into its separate tokens. So we have a shadow X variable, a shadow Y variable, and we can use them separately now, especially for mobile, where there is no, at least to my knowledge, for Android and iOS, there is no one shadow shorthand. It might be useful to expand them into separate parts so that they're easier to control for you or for your developers. And yeah, if I click the settings thing again, you can see that there's a couple of features that we have. You can also expand the other token types that have objects as values. So typography, for example, it has many different properties: font weight, font size, font family, and maybe you want to expand those. Instead of using a typography shorthand, you want to have them as separate tokens. You can check this. And the same with expanding borders and composition tokens. By default, we expand them because we don't really have one shorthand for composition tokens. It kind of always makes sense to expand those. And this kind of leads me into the next thing that I should show, which is the functions tab. So we now, because you cannot do everything in the JSON config here, you might want to change the behavior of our transforms. So what we can do, we can click on this functions tab. And here we have a little bit of JavaScript. So I can actually remove these two. They're not needed for now. So what we can see here always is we have an import style dictionary and our SD transforms, which is a collection of style dictionary transforms that you'll need if you have Token Studio JSON format. And we can register those transforms on the style dictionary object. And this is the style dictionary object that's being used under the hood of this configurator. And here you can see that we have those options. So we have these are basically the settings, the second parameter, and I can change them here. So I can say here, I want to expand typography tokens, and you see now it's set to true. Oh, I didn't save my file when I deleted this. So I can delete it, save it, and okay, now it will stay gone. And I can also uncheck all of them. And now you can see, they're all false. I can also check all of them. And now they're all true. So that's kind of nice. You can do it through the settings. You can also choose to do it in the code yourself. But if you're not as comfortable editing the JavaScript, it might be easier to do it through the UI. And then there's another thing is at the moment, I think a lot of people might still use the token transformer by Jan 6. We try to look at how can we, so if we look at the token transformer and we look at this diagram, for example, with the token transformer, it basically means that we have another, step. But basically, there's a step here. And that there's a step between this, so that there's an arrow here. And in this arrow, there's the token transformer. And we figured because we're going from JSON to JSON, and we already have a parse step over here, it might not make sense to have a token transformer step here. So we maybe make it a lot easier for people if we just can remove that step, the token transformer, and just cover everything in the style dictionary transforms. So that's what we did. So the token transformer at the moment is actually obsolete because the SD transforms covers it covers all the features that the token transformer would have. So if you're using style dictionary, there's no reason anymore to use the token transformer. Because as you can see, we can exclude parent keys. We can expand the tokens as we want. And these are basically the features that the token transformer has. So it reduces a step in your pipeline, which I think is always nice to simplify your pipeline. So yeah, about SD transforms, maybe a little bit more background of what they are. So if we go here, this is the link We can also share this link, but it's basically, if you look for SD transforms, then you should be able to find it. And basically it's a collection of transforms. And actually at this moment, it also has a couple of parsers. So if we look at this technical diagram, it's a collection of parsers and a collection of transforms. And they make it easy to go from your Token Studio tokens JSON to something that Style Dictionary understands. So it has a lot of different transforms. For example, you might have a description property in your tokens, so that you have a description for all your tokens. And we have a transform that transforms that to comments. So in Style Dictionary, they don't use description. In Style Dictionary, they use comment. And if you use that transform, it will make sure that your descriptions are translated to comments and that they end up as comments in your CSS, for example, so that your developers have a bit more context on what the token is. So this is also a nice way to communicate your description to your developers. But also, for example, this resolve math, so the thing that resolves mathematical statements. And yeah, there's a whole list of it. There's even, there's some generic ones that are actually multi-platform already. And there's some examples of CSS transforms. So for example, the typography shorthand, that's a CSS shorthand, and it's really specific to CSS. So that only really makes sense if you're using CSS. But for example, we've also recently added, or actually that was a contribution by one of you guys, a shorthand for Android Compose. So if you're using Android Compose, we have a typography shorthand for that. And yeah, here you can see actually that the usage of this is very similar to what you see in the token configurator. So if we look at the token configurator in this functions tab, we see that we import the Style Dictionary and the register transforms, and then we register it on the Style Dictionary object. And that's kind of what we here also documented, how you should use it. And here it also shows how you can use the Token Studio transform group in your Style Dictionary config, which again, you can also see. If you go to the config here, there's transform group Token Studio. So the Style Dictionary configurator and the SD transforms package, they're really interconnected because both of them make it so that Token Studio design tokens can be exported to different platforms. So yeah, that's a little bit about SD transforms. And what's also useful to know is that there's a lot of so at some point you have this configurator, right? And this is your playground. I think it's the best way to talk about it. It's a playground. So once you're done playing and exploring, and you want to hand it over to your developers, at some point you have to eject from this. So you have to leave the configurator, and you have to really go into a code editor and have your developers really go at it. So that's mostly described in this README as well. It's this is how you use the SD transforms package. This is how you create. This is how you example usage of the transforms. This is how you can create a custom transform group. So, for example, you might want to extend the collection of transforms that we have. You might want to extend it with your own transforms. Maybe you want to change it to camel case or to kebab case. Maybe you want to take out one of the transforms that you don't want. Then this is an easy way to do it in Style Dictionary, to create a custom transform group that extends the transforms that we have. Here's the documentation about the options that I showed already, where you can expand the composition, typography, border, shadow tokens, or exclude the parent keys. Excluding the parent keys is something you need if you do a single JSON export from the Figma plugin, because then the token set names will still be in the token JSON. And for the references to work, you actually have to take them out. So that's why that's there. And then here there's some nice full examples of code that you can kind of directly copy and run, and then it should work. So if you have a couple of design tokens that fit this glob, so they end with .tokens.json, you should be able to copy paste basically this example, and then you should be able to see some nice outputs. So the next topic I wanted to show is theming. So how do we handle themes? So if I go here, I think it's this one. Yeah. So this is an example of themes. So if you use theming inside of the Figma plugin, and you export that project, you should get multiple files. So you should get at least a themes.json file with a $sign in front. And it might look something like this. This is just a simple example. So we have a light theme and a dark theme. And for our light theme, we're using the global token set, and we're using the light token set. And the global token set is our source. It's basically our palettes, our base layer, let's say. And then we also have a dark, and that's using the dark and the global. So what we actually want is we want output that looks something like this. So we want a variables dark and a variables light CSS output. So here we can see we have a semantic color primary that's white in light mode. And we have a semantic color primary. So it's the same token, but in this case, for this theme, it's a different color. So what it looks like in the global JSON is that we have two colors. We have a color-based primary black and a color-based primary white. And then for the dark, we have a semantic color primary that is using the primary black. And for the for the dark, we have a color-based primary black is being used. And for the light, we have a color-based primary white that's being used. So then what we see is that we have a different color depending on which theme we are in. So what the configurator is doing is when you have a themes.json, it says, okay, I see that you're using themes. In that case, I'm going to make a couple of changes for you. So first thing that you might notice in the top left corner, we have a themes segmented control element here. I can actually turn off a theme if I want and then run play. And now I only get my dark theme as output. Might be useful if you just want to debug or look into a single theme. Turn them both off, I guess. Then I get nothing. Yeah, let's turn them both back on. So now we have them both again. And what it also does, it says it basically puts a placeholder here as your source, because basically, and this probably needs a little bit of explanation. So what happens here, this is a placeholder. What it does is because the source depends on the theme. So if I look at the themes JSON again, for the light theme, we want to have our light and our global set. So this one and this one. But for our dark, we want other token sets. We want only the global and the dark. So this one is actually dynamic. So the source depends on in which theme we're running at the moment. So we're running Style Dictionary for each theme. And yeah, it depends on the theme, which token sets we want. So this is why we put a placeholder here. So under the hood of the configurator, we're filling that placeholder with the right token sets depending on this configuration file. And you can see we have a placeholder here as well. So if we're exporting multiple files, so one for each theme, then we need a different file name. Otherwise, it's going to override itself. So we can put this placeholder theme. We can put it anywhere basically, and we can still change this. So we can say, for example, maybe we want to put here vars, and here as well. You can see we get the different outputs in our files. Yeah, the names of our files have changed. The content is still the same. So this is a handy placeholder again that works inside of the configurator. But this is a configurator only feature. So as soon as you eject and you go out of the configurator, you'll want to look at this documentation, and there's a themes full example. And basically the magic that I'm doing under the hood of the token configurator to go over each theme and then fill out the placeholders, it's doing that here basically. So the magic will then be on your end. So what basically is doing, it's reading out the themes.json file, and then it's looping over each theme and running Style Dictionary for each theme, and it's filling what needs to be filled for each theme. So the source mostly, and yeah. So that's how theming is done in this project. And the last thing I want to show, and I think this is something that, second to last thing I want to show, and this is something that I see a lot of questions about, is how do I filter tokens in my output? So there's multiple use cases for that. So maybe I can go actually to that example again. You can see in this example that I only get the semantic token. But if I was using no filter, so maybe I should turn these filters off, then I can show it. then you can see I get all the tokens. So I get the base tokens, the color base primary black, the color base primary white. And then I also get my semantic token, which is theme dependent. So only the semantic token changes for theme. And a question I get a lot is, how do I only get my themed tokens, or how do I only get my component tokens and not all of the tokens that it depends on? So all of the base tokens, the global tokens. And the answer is you use a filter. So how to use a filter. So let me just add back this filter property, my filter. And then the question, of course, is what is my filter? If we go to the functions tab, you can see that I've registered a filter here. So this is a style dictionary filter. And what you can do with a filter is if you apply a filter to a format. So again, if I go to this technical diagram, there's a format step here, the third step. To this step, you can apply filters, and that filters out tokens that should not go into the final output. So here we can see you can actually filter by the file path of the token. So where is the token coming from? If the token is coming from the global.json, then we should filter it out. So we put a negate here. We could also say we only want the global JSON tokens. So if we do like this, we can see that we only get the global tokens, but we're missing the semantic token. So you can also turn it around if you want. So now we only get the semantic token again. So filters are really useful for that. You can filter by the file path, but you can also choose to filter by other things. And I'll show an example of something that you can also filter by in a bit. Let me see. I see that I opened this one. Is there something I needed to show here? I don't think so. Oh, this is multi-dimensional themes. Okay, but let's stick to filters for now. So another filter you might want to do is you might want to filter by the category of the token. So if we go to categories here, we can see here, this is the category color, and this one has the category semantic. And maybe you want to say, I only want to get my semantic tokens, or maybe I only want to get my button tokens, or my input tokens, or my combo box tokens. So what we first need to do then is make sure that those category and type and these things, that these attributes are actually available. So what we can do is we can say we register a custom transform group, and we can actually see that here. There's an example on how to do this. So that is style dictionary.custom transform group. So we just copy this. And what we want here is we want the transforms. We do need to load them in. So load in transforms from the SD transforms. And we're going to register a transform group, a custom one. So this is called custom/token studio instead of token studio. We're going to put our transforms on there as they are from this. We're going to add, because I don't know, we're doing kebab casing. So let's do, I think it's called name/cti/kebab. So then our token names will be kebab cased. So here you can see they're camel cased, but we want them with, like this basically. So we add this one. We don't need to filter out any transforms, but also what we want to add is we want to add these attributes. So I can actually check it here. I can go to transforms. I can search for its attributes/CTI it's called. Okay, nice. So what we can do is we can say attributes/CTI. And that means that we have some attributes available that we can filter by. So maybe something that we can do here is do a quick console log. And we can say token.attributes, and I can show you what that looks like. What we also need to do is we need to take this one and use it. So we have to go to our config, and we have to change this to custom/token studio. Okay, so now we actually see that our output gets nicely kebab cased. So we can see that it's kind of working. If we go to inspect element and we go to the console, we should see if we click play, we should see a lot of output in our console. And we can see here, this is the object that I'm expecting now. So because of this attributes/CTI, I'm getting this attributes object. So I can look at the token.attributes. And here I can see that there's a category called semantic. So now I can say I want to filter by token.attributes category, and it must be equal to semantic. And as you can see, we get the same output now. I could also say I want it to be core, or what is it, global? Yeah, I need to check. Oh, color. Okay. So now I only get my colors. So this is also a really nice way to filter your tokens, is by using the hierarchy of the token name. So this is the category, this is the type, and this is the item. So CTI, that's why it's called CTI, category, type, item. So that's also a very useful thing to filter by. And this goes into the next thing that I will show in a bit about component tokens and filtering tokens per component and actually outputting them per component. So imagine that you have 15 different components and you want to split up all the tokens per component, and you want to maybe even output the tokens per directory of your token of your component folders. So yeah, that's for later. But the next thing that I wanted to show, actually, we have a new feature in Token Studio called multi-dimensional theming, because we saw that it was quite common and quite painful to do to create your own themes and basically permutate in a single dimension all of the different themes combinations. So maybe you have dark mode, light mode, but maybe you also have a couple of sub-brands, and maybe you have some language differences, and maybe you have a casual style and a business style inside your design system. And these are all different parameters of that can create a theme. So let's say you might have a purple casual dark mode theme. So we saw that themes can be more than just single dimensions. They can be multidimensional. And this project here is actually an example of that. So what we see in our themes, Jason, here, it's quite a big one. What we can see here is we have a light theme, and it's grouped under the name theme. And here there's a dark, which is also grouped under the name theme. So light and dark are both themes. Then we also have Red Planet, which is a brand. Maybe it's a sub-brand. And then we have a Yellow Cab, and that's also a brand. So these are also themes, but they're living under the same umbrella. And then maybe we have contrast. So maybe we have a default contrast and a high contrast. So what we end up with, if we combine all the different groups that we have, we get basically a list of possible themes. And because we have 4 different groups here, each with 2 or 3 possibilities, we see that we get a lot of theme combinations here. So we get light, red planet, default English, right? Light, red, default Japanese, etc., etc. So this is multi-dimensional theming in action, basically. And what we also see is, I've turned off a couple of the themes, otherwise I get a lot of output. But you can see here the differences. So here we have our vars, light, red planet, default English. And if we go all the way down, I think there's some text here that's in English, I assume. Yeah, so this is now in English. But if I go to the Japanese, I assume this will be in Japanese. Yeah. So multi-dimensional theming is also something that's supported in the configurator at the moment. And I'm currently working on making it easy also to use this in your own project. So when you're ejecting from the playground and you're really handing it over to your developers, I will be exposing a utility in this library that will make it easy to create these theme permutations for you to get basically the same output as I have here. Here. So that's still coming. Now we get to the last part, which is our example project. So quite recently I made an example. We called it Lion example because it's a design system example in code, and it uses Lion under the hood. Lion is a white label component set. It's not super relevant for this talk today, but what I wanted to show is basically the setup here. And why it's so powerful. So I'm going to show you my Figma file. We have one component, so I took it easy on. I started with a very simple example. So we have one component. This is our button component. It doesn't even have a button text. That's how simple I left it. But basically, I can change the theme. So I have 6 different themes. I can go to casual blue, and you can see that turns to blue. I can go to business purple. You can see that the rounded corners are no longer rounded because business, it's a bit more straight, a bit less friendly. And if I go to casual blue again, you can see we get the rounded corners and the color. So basically there's two properties, two design tokens. It's the button background color and it's the button border radius. These are the two parameters. And depending on the theme, they change. So that's what's happening in Figma. Now we sync this to GitHub. So we can go to our settings here and we see we have a GitHub sync that's active, and we can actually see edit here. We can see that it's going to our Token Studio Lion example repository to the Figma tokens branch. What I can do now, for example, is maybe I want to adjust something. So maybe I want to say, okay, this button, and I can do it in the JSON. I'm a bit more comfortable in the JSON. So yeah. So what I can do here is I can, for example, say that for the button, I want for the purple, I want my purple theme, it's going to use blue for now. It's a bit strange maybe, but I just want to see, I just want to show what happens when you change something. So I can do save JSON over here, apply to the page. So what happens now if I'm in casual purple, I actually get a blue background. Strange change, but yeah, just demoing the change. And then I can push to GitHub. I can say, yeah, I can say fix, change the background to blue for purple casual. And I can say push change. And with some luck, this goes all right. Always a bit scary when you're doing live demo. I don't have to create a pull request because I actually created something that does it automatically for me. So as soon as I push to this branch, I have a GitHub action. This is an automated process, basically. And what this will do is it will create a pull request for me. And it does a couple of extra things, actually. So it creates the pull request. So now if I click on pull request, I have an open pull request here. Ignore Vercel. Vercel is not being very nice, but we have Netlify as well here to help us out. So here we can see the change. So we can see the change in GitHub here. We can see that we changed this background default color to use blue for the purple theme. And something really cool is happening here because if I refresh now, I see I have some more changes. So I can see now that actually our output is also changed. So we have a button business purple.css and a button casual purple.css. And this has also been changed. And this change has been added to the pull request. So this is the designer change, this over here. And these two are as a consequence because it's being ran by Style Dictionary. And let me show you where that's happening. In this pipeline, there's a process, Figma tokens, automated process running. And what it does is it runs Style Dictionary for us. So we can see here it's running Style Dictionary on the changed tokens. And then it's committing those changes to the pull request we just opened automatically. So everything is automatic. I don't have to do anything. And then here, yeah, we can see the full change. And actually, it's even making a deploy preview for us. So we can actually see it in action. So if we go to this deploy preview, I have a very simple demo here. I have a button over here. This is our button. And I can change the theme here. So I can say, I want my blue and I want my business. And you can see that the demo changes dynamically. But the purple should now actually stay blue. Yeah, so that's correct now. So that's what we changed. So we can actually see the change that the designer made. And we can see it in code directly in a deploy preview. So this makes it really easy to, as a designer, to make a change. And then tell your developers, look, I made a change. You can preview the change here and you can check it. But the process is very automated. You don't have to shoot in a meeting with your developers. All this red tape and bureaucracy, it doesn't need to happen. You can just see it live immediately. And what's powering this is this entire Style Dictionary workflow combined with deploy previews. So even if you use Netlify or Vercel or whatever storybook maybe on some host. And also, the GitHub actions, I need to probably show what's happening there. So we have some GitHub workflows over here. And we have two workflows. So we have a workflow called Figma tokens push. So this workflow, it's being triggered as soon as there's a push on the Figma tokens branch. Well, that's what we did when we were in Figma. So we were in Figma and we clicked this button, push to GitHub. So then it pushes our new tokens, it pushes it to the Figma tokens branch on GitHub. So that action by the designer, it triggers this workflow. So if I go back again, it triggers the workflow and then it does a job here. And the job is called pull request. Basically, create a pull request for me, please. And this should be the destination branch, your default branch. I'm going to make it this title. You can even put a body of the PR. And you have to supply it with your GitHub personal access token. So that has the permission to create the pull request. Then the next thing that happens is the other workflow, which is called Figma tokens PR. So that is when a pull request is created. So that's the kind of one workflow is triggering the other workflow. So in this workflow, what happens is it's taking the pull request and it's running Style Dictionary over our tokens for us automatically, and it's then committing those changes. So that's what I showed you in this action. So in this action, you can see that it processes the Figma tokens, runs Style Dictionary. You can see that here. And then it commits the changes automatically. So we get a pull request completely finished with all the changes that we need. And then all a developer has to do is just, or maybe you don't even need a developer. If they trust you as a designer, then maybe it's good enough for them that you have a deploy preview and you can just check the deploy preview and sign off of it yourself. You see that it works. And then you're really autonomous as a designer. So that for me, that's the happy flow. If I'm stepping into the role of a designer. So last thing I should show is what's actually happening in my repository here. And the most important thing is our Style Dictionary config, of course. So this is the Style Dictionary config that we have. Maybe I should make it a bit bigger. So again, we're importing Style Dictionary, we're importing our SD transforms, we're making sure that it's registered. So we do a register check here. Then here we're registering a custom transform group. So I've showed that before as well. I add this attribute /CTI and the kebab case because I'm mostly interested in CSS, and in CSS we like kebab case. And then this is the interesting part. So what I want is I want to filter all the tokens that are related to the button, and I want to make sure that those button tokens are output in the button folder. So I have a button folder over here, and in this button folder is my button component. So this is just my button component, and it's using the CSS variables here. This is not very important to understand, but just this is my button component code. And here we have our button CSS. And you can see that this is the Style Dictionary output. So this is our button background color, blue, and our border radius of 0. So this is our business blue. And if I go to casual purple, it should actually be blue because we changed that. And it should have a border radius. And if I create a second component now, let's say not a button, but maybe accordion, then I want probably an accordion folder. And then I want all my accordion tokens to go into that accordion folder. So this is also a question I got quite a bit, like how do I filter my tokens and put them in the right folders for all my components, especially for component tokens. This makes a lot of sense. And that's actually quite easy to do as soon as you put attribute CTI in there. So we put these attributes and then we can filter by the attributes. So what we can do here is we can say for our CSS platform, we're going to have files over here. So these are our output files, and we can generate the files. So we can pass in the array of components that we have. Right now, we only have a button. So it's an array of one item with just a button. And then the theme name, of course. So we're running Style Dictionary for each theme. We have 6 different themes. And then what this generate files array does, it creates a filter for us here, a token filter. And the filter, it takes a category and then the token, and it compares the token.attributes.category with the category that we're getting in. So it's just a bit of JavaScript basically to make sure that that all our tokens are being sorted and exported to the right folders based on the token category. Yeah, so that's I think that's it for me. I think that is the full presentation that I wanted to do.
All right, that was a
Cool.
nice one. I think a lot of really good information in there. We also have a bunch of questions. We have about 10 minutes left. So you want to go through some of the questions, Robert?
Yes, let's start with that. Maybe you can stop screen sharing, by the way. So we have the full view. Yeah. First question from Andre. I hope I pronounce it correctly. I'm working on web, desktop, and mobile, iOS and Android product together. We have a very similar design decisions, but there are differences, animations, shadows, typography that does not work across platforms. Could you advise me how to approach it? Can I have multiple JSON files, or is it better to have everything in one and just somehow specify the platform in Token Studio?
Yeah, so multi-platform is actually a really important topic for us at the moment. At the moment, the SD Transforms it has the most support for CSS, basically web as a platform. And we really want to support also iOS, Android, Flutter, all these other platforms. And these are different like languages, different programming languages. So what worked for CSS might not work for Android or iOS. So at the moment, it's possible to expand tokens. So you can say my typography token, I'm going to expand it in separate things. That's already really useful, I think, for mobile, because they might not have the same shorthands that we have in web. But we do need some more input about what are the right values for certain platforms. So for example, colors, maybe in web, you can use RGB, HSL, but maybe in Android, you can only use hex. But since I'm not a mobile developer, I'm not sure about them. So we opened an issue on the SD Transforms. And I'm going to actually grab it, where we're tracking this multi-platform support. And it would be really nice for people that are doing mobile developments to pitch in and tell us, like, this is how we expect the values to be in our platforms. And then we can make it happen, hopefully. So let me get this multi-platform tracker and put it in the chat. Should I put it in the chat or put it on Answer Live? Yeah. Okay.
You can put it in the chat. Then we will also add it to the video as well, so people can find it.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the chat.
All right. In the meantime, do you want to pick the next question, Mike?
Yeah,
or
sure.
Shall I pick one?
Yeah.
Because I think some of them already are answered. Maybe.
Yeah, I think one of the questions really was like, how would we build the development pipeline for tokens using this tool? Copy and paste the configuration and custom transport code into our own node process. And there were a couple of other questions around this as well. So I think really the question is, how do you eject from the playground and move into your own pipeline? So I think you explained it a bit, but maybe we can iterate on that once more quickly.
Yeah. I'll iterate on it once more. I'll share my screen for a sec. So basically, you will have to jump into this SD Transforms project. So Token Studio /SD Transforms, which has the collection of transforms to go from Token Studio JSON to Style Dictionary. And especially the part where it has like the full example, that one really shows, okay, how do I actually use it, the full example in my node process, in my own code editor, ejecting from the configurator. So the configurator is more of a playground, and it does a little bit of magic under the hood to make things easy to play with. But then as soon as you start really ejecting, then I would look at this full example over here. And this shows you how in Node.js you can import Style Dictionary and the register transforms, and then use Style Dictionary.extend to create your Style Dictionary config like this. This is an example of how you can use the transforms as is instead of using the transform group. But we also have, for example, an example here that says custom transform group, where you can kind of extend the transform group that we have, and then create your custom transform group, and that way you can add your own things to it. That's actually a bit nicer way to do it than what we have in the full example here. This is a little bit.
So when we so it's not as simple as really copy pasting the JavaScript from the playground, right? So because we're working on kind of an eject button that gives you a download package that you could actually run in your repository. It's not there right now, so there's a bit of manual replication in terms of what you have set up here and what you want to run on your repository. But yeah, like I said, I think very soon we'll have in the next couple of weeks or next 2 months, maybe we'll probably have a eject button, and that will generate something that you could run then through your GitHub Actions and should work out of the box.
Yeah, there is at the moment a small, very tiny button, download all files as zip, but it just downloads some of the source files. It doesn't really grab things from the functions tab, so it's not a proper eject button. So we need to make it proper eject button.
Yeah. All right.
There
was also another question around math, and I think because it came in the chat as well, somebody asked how robust is the math resolver basically, I think that maybe we can scroll back a bit, because in the chat there was a very specific example about some math function that was not going right. So are there any limitations? Maybe we don't have to solve an issue here, but are there any limitations on the math resolver, Joren?
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't have like a list of limitations on the top of my head, but basically anything that what is that thing called? Express eval, that and in combination with the post CSS calc value parser or whatever that's called. It's the limitations of those two together that is the limiting factor for the resolve math. Okay. References inside math expressions work. Most math expressions that you can think of probably work, like multiplication, division, minus, plus, and there's a couple of functions you can use, like the CSS function, like round to, and these things also work. There's a limitation in terms of that if you want to do mathematical expressions with units or with variables that have different units, it is a bit hard. So you cannot, for example, do 16 rem plus 5 pixels, because rem is a relative unit and pixels is an absolute unit, and they don't work together like that. But what you can do is, for example, you can say 10 rem plus 5 rem, because they're both rem, so you would just get 15 rem. So that is a bit of a limitation. We cannot mix together absolute and relative units. And there's also a limitation with regards to output references. So there's a feature in Style Dictionary called output references, specifically for CSS, I think, where instead of resolving the references, it will put CSS var statements around them. These don't play nice with transitive transforms, and the resolve math is a transitive transform, which means it transforms the actual value because it multiplies and then you get a new value. And then the output references feature of Style Dictionary gets really confused about that, because the new value is no longer the old value. And this is a bug. I consider that a bug in Style Dictionary, and we recently raised it. It's with Style Dictionary, and the maintainers also asked me directly for feedback on it and if I have any suggestions to change it. So it is something that we're looking into, this whole output references thing in combination with transitive transforms like the resolve math.
All right. Thank you. That was, I think, a very detailed description of the limitations. Nice. I think most of the other questions that they're in the Q&A were actually later on answered by you during your talk. So I would ask people actually if there are any open questions, maybe quickly in the chat, then we'll spend a few more minutes going through those.
And I also see some specific issues, and maybe for these issues, it's better to post them on our Slack so we can do a better deep dive than in this talk.
Yeah, that's true. I'm kind of ignoring the very specific ones here. That is true.
If it's really like technical specific questions, like Slack is a good place to start. And then if you really think you found a bug or something that doesn't work as expected, just create an issue on GitHub, and usually look at it really quickly and respond quite fast. So and we can see if we can fix it.
We'll once more share the links to the repositories of the Style Dictionary Transforms, and it's actually already there. Maybe we can post it more, because there's a board on there.
As mentioned before on our on the YouTube video that we're going to post probably tomorrow, we will also post all the resources that we talked about in this talk, so you can find them over there as well. Maybe this is one good one just to answer shortly. Can I take the tokens.zip file produced from Token Studio and place it directly in the SD configurator?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
I think, you first need to unzip it and then you can use it,
Nope.
right?
You
Oh,
put
you
the
can
zip
use directly.
in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Or
Yeah,
yeah,
so you can
there's
just click the
two
upload.
ways.
Oh, sorry,
There's
go ahead.
you can upload the zip file, or you can upload a single JSON file. If you don't have any themes and you have a single file export, then that works as well. Then you don't have to zip it.
Cool. Thanks. That was a short one, so I thought let's pick that one.
Yeah.
Maybe I think this is not answered yet. Are you thinking support composite token in order to have compatibility with Figma?
Is this referring to composition tokens? Because those
Yeah.
get expanded.
Yeah, I think this is referencing to the composition tokens coming out of the plugin. And yes, this is already supported, so you can actually expand those similarly to how we showed the box shadow or typography.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's already available.
They actually get expanded by default because
yeah,
because otherwise Style Dictionary doesn't know what to do with it.
I think there was one other question around the color modifiers. We use color modifiers provided by Token Studio to add alpha values to colors and try to run the SD Transforms libraries color modifier transform. The alpha values do not seem to show up when we build tokens for iOS Swift. The UI color instances that are generated do not include alpha values. Are the color modifier transforms also more tailored for web rather than for mobile? Yes, it's a good one. And actually, this is, I think, one of those areas where we would love some more input on how these transforms should happen for specific platforms. Yeah, so like Joren mentioned, we have a tracking issue for this. So that's a really good place to give us some more details on what's happening, but maybe with an example of what's going wrong, and what you would be expecting really. Then we can look into it and get it in place.
Yeah, what I expect with color modifiers is that it exports, like it takes your color and then it does the modification and then it formats it to hex, sRGB, HLSL, some format. And then that one should then be transformed to your UI color in a way that the alpha doesn't get lost. So it sounds like a bug or like something that we don't support yet or that we don't have yet. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for that one.
So how do you recommend handling different screen sizes?
Yeah, I was also looking at that. I think it's a bit more of a token architecture discussion. Generally, what we do at least is when we want to work with breakpoints. So there's two approaches to it, right? One is you can go fluid, and we have a great talk on that in terms of at least tokens by Marcodes. They're on our YouTube channel behind the system about fluid design. But if you're not going down the fluid route, which is pretty complicated, then you're going to be working with breakpoints. Which essentially means that you're going to introduce breakpoints as a dimension to your theme. And there you had, let's say, have a token set for a small and a token set for a large breakpoint to keep it simple. And in those token sets, you would then basically have a couple of variables that influence other tokens. So let's say if you have a more dense spacing or a larger spacing or smaller typography scale and a larger typography scale, you could either put those in the breakpoints completely, but there would be a lot of replication. And that's usually where we use math in the tokens, where we have a scaling factor that then sits in your breakpoint token set. So let's say a scaling factor for your typography that either makes it all larger or smaller, or similarly for your spacing, for example. And those you run then as a permutation on your team so that you can then create in CSS, for example, your media queries, where you then give these different tokens for different breakpoints. Yeah, and then if you configure that as a theme, then of course, Style Dictionary with the SD Transforms will also handle that by outputting these different breakpoints as separate themes. But you'd probably be better off to kind of split those off and not make them dependent on the team or not directly related to the team, but rather have, for example, CSS variables in there that feed into other variables across your token sets. But yeah, the basic idea is that you introduce that as a dimension to your theming and keep those scaling factors in there or those decisions in there.
All right, I see one other that is upvoted 2 times. So let's take a look at that one from Bastian. Is it possible to generate mixin for a group of tokens, especially for expanded typography tokens, so that we could use? And then, Joren, maybe you can read along with me.
Yeah, so the
yeah, which one
include
are you
from
trying to-
SAS, right? I think this is it. Yeah, for SAS. So can we create includes directly from expanded composition tokens?
Is it the one? Is it possible to generate mixin for a group of tokens? That one?
Yeah.
Let's see. Right, so you have a file that. Oh, okay. So you separate them by file or something. I don't really understand the snippets or the example.
Yeah, so this is more SAS based, Joren. So I think
Yeah.
they're trying to create a SAS include, right, for the name of the composition token. Yeah, instead of having all these separate values in a class.
You'd probably have to do that with the filters that I showed. So as these the style dictionary filters, where you set up this attributes thing that puts the attributes so that you have some information, some meta information about each token. And then if you find that the type of the token, for example, you could maybe filter by the type of the token. If the type of the token is a typography token, then you know it's a typography token, and then you can say, okay, that kind of token we filter out for this file. And then we have another file that we output, and then that token is filtered in. So you can kind of take apart the tokens from your dictionary and like put them in different files using filters. So it's similar to my example with the components, with the component tokens, where I separate them into separate files for each component.
Yeah, and I think in SAS then we would have a bit of formatting around it, right? Like how we would declare a CSS class. So I think in SAS also you have a declaration for an include, if I'm not mistaken. So then we would be able to generate that as well, right? By wrapping these expanded tokens, let's say in something like a class or a SAS include. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think we're through the time for today, Robert. So
yeah, I think we handled most of the questions. So as mentioned before, I already mentioned the Slack channel and in the chat. So if there's anything, feel free to reach out over there or in the repository. We will try to upload the video as soon as possible, so we can also share all the resources over there in the description. So keep an eye out on that. And thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, it was great having everybody here. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Joren, for this great session.
Yep.